Yes.
So one of the ones I wanted to talk to, and I want to make sure we understand what it really means, is the bump stock case. So it was a 6-3 ruling. The conservative justices said that the ATF went too far in determining that the bump stocks could turn a semi-automatic weapon into an automatic machine gun.
Yep.
So, any thoughts on that, Ericka? What you're a strong Second Amendment supporter. Are they machine guns?
You know, Jay, here's the deal. I'm kind of a gun nut, so my take is even if they made them machine guns, I don't see why the ATF gets to regulate that. But I know I'm probably in the minority. Maybe I'm too much of a gun nut, but I think I'm glad to see this get overturned. Because do you remember, was it last year in Congress? They were trying to say that things like arm braces were bump stocks now. And they basically were trying to ban everything and anything that they could possibly construe as assisting someone in firing.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is there was a 1934 law that in the United States we banned machine guns. And the definition of a machine gun is you pull the trigger once and multiple rounds are delivered.
Right.
So when they sat down and they looked at this, the 3 liberal justices, typical in their fashion, when they ruled on abortion cases and those kind of things, are pure science deniers. The evidence was very, very clear. When you look at these guns with the bump stocks, they allow you to shoot faster, but each bullet is distributed with one pull of the trigger. So even though this evidence was there, they decided to deny the science again, which is so typical of these liberals. I mean, they don't believe that a baby is a baby. They don't believe it's a human being. They're denying the science.
You know, our Supreme Court justices are not biologists, Jay. How can they possibly determine what human beings are?
Right. So again, we've got these people that are coming in. The role of the Supreme Court is pretty simple. Look at the laws, decide whether or not they're constitutional, whether they pass muster. Their job is they're not the president. They're not the executive branch.
That's right.
They're not the legislative branch. They don't create laws. What do? They interpret the laws that are on the books. And obviously, they might follow the science occasionally. At least the conservative justices do. But there is no way these liberal justices wanted to look at the science, wanted to look at the evidence, fact-based. And so they go on and make up their own stories.
That's right. What is it, Jay? Isn't there a word for it when you have an outcome that you're trying to get and you like back maneuver the evidence? Isn't there a word for that? They seem to do that a lot on the left.
They do. It's confirmation bias is what they're doing. So they already have their decisions made. And so they're just looking for something, anything that can reinforce it. And if they can't find it, what do?
Make it up.
Make it up. So here we are, the liberals, let's make it up. So at some point...
This is why we lose, Jay, okay? We're too honest, okay? We're too integrous and just for politics. If we could just be smarmy, slimy people, maybe we would understand things better.
Well, most humans have their own fantasies. I mean, everybody has a little fantasy of some sort. My fantasy, I'm going to be very clear and very open with it, was to play basketball for the Boston Celtics. Okay, that was my fantasy. I know you may have different fantasies. Maybe I don't want to hear them. But
no, I wanted to be president of the United States.
Well, you still have an opportunity.
Yep. Well, okay. Maybe.
It is. There's opportunity out there. There's a saying that anyone can become president, and Joe Biden is a living example of that.
Proof.
That it takes nothing at all. So you got a shot there, Ericka.
Hey, if Joe Biden can do it, I can do it.
Well, unfortunately, he can't do it. He can get elected. that doesn't mean he can be president. And there's a real this area of distinguishing. Just wow, I'm just talking like wow. But I have an excuse. This is my first day with the new tongue, so I'm trying to work this out and figure this out. So bear with us on this. But I want to get back to a little bit about what the whole bump stock thing is really all about.
Yeah.
And what it is really about is that agencies within the government make the rules. That the Congress has been so poor in their writing of laws that they can be interpreted in a variety of different ways. So one of the big cases that is coming through, it's actually 3 cases built into one. And it goes back to what they call the Chevron deference.
Oh, Jay.
And for those who might not be totally familiar with the Chevron deference, it's a 1984 ruling that the Supreme Court made.
Yes.
And what they said is that judges have to defer to agencies for a reasonable interpretation of ambiguous statutes. So what they're saying is that these unelected officials within the government make judicial decisions.
That's right.
Instead of judges.
That's right.
So what we're doing is we're providing this power to people that come and go within the government, people who aren't elected. Every 4 years, we know they bring in new heads of agencies. Every time there's a new president, they bring in people that will interpret rules and regulations, that have the ability to make judges defer and take on allowing these administrative, bureaucratic advocates to make the law.
It is like permission for the administrative state, essentially. So when we're on the show all the time and we talk about the administrative state or the deep state or the 4th unelected branch of government, this is kind of like, isn't this basically like the justification for it almost?
It really is. And if you go back, Neil Gorsuch, you know the thing I'm saying, like Biden.
You know the thing.
You know the thing.
Neil Gorsuch.
That's him. Justice, Supreme Court Justice. Wrote a book before he became a Supreme Court Justice. Oh. And he took on the administrative state. He talked about it's a really difficult book to read for someone like me because there's a lot of details and he actually follows the science. But he talks about the rules and regulations that the administrative state have done and how this country cannot survive allowing these bureaucrats to come in and make all the decisions that the legislative branch has given up trying to do because they're a bunch of wusses that don't want to take a firm stand on anything and all they care about is getting reelected. So they turn it over to these administrators who are appointed in some cases. Some cases they're hired and they move through the ranks and they start making decisions that hurt us. They're biased. They're not part of the law. And I think it's going to be very, very interesting on how this is ruled in the Chevron deference case.
That is one of the ones that I am most looking forward to this summer because that changes everything. It really changes everything. It essentially it delegitimizes so many of those departments that we keep saying need to be gotten rid of. So I think this clears the way. Now I know that there's a certain former presidential candidate that you don't like very much, who I happen to think is great, that made some promises to go in and he actually expressed a plan to get rid of a lot of these departments. I'm still pulling for him to be vice president, y'all. Vivek Ramaswamy, that's my vote, but we'll see what happens.
It's not Vivek, it's Vivek. Rhymes with fake. So, if you're going to have him be vice president, I mean, we had this big issue with Kamala, pronouncing her
Oh, it's
name.
going to
and
be all over.
You know, we had a lot of problems when we were pronouncing her name wrong. So he made it very, very firm that it's Vivek, rhymes with cake and fake. And again, you know, he said a lot, and I certainly know that he'd be a better vice president than the one we currently have.
I'm telling you, and this is my thing. Here's the deal: as get rid of as much of the government as possible, and you'll get my vote. If you promise to get rid of the government, then you got my vote. That's
one of the things that you'll see with this Supreme Court that's really, really important, and we saw in the Dobbs case. And in the Dobbs case, they went back and they overturned Roe v. Wade. Okay. Now, some people were very happy with that. Some people were very sad with that.
Very mad.
But one of the things that happens with this Chevron case, and it's actually not a Chevron case, it goes back to these fishermen in New Jersey that are the ones that are the plaintiffs in this case and all of that.
That's right.
But what the fear is with all of them is this would overturn over 70 cases that has been ruled referencing the Chevron deference.
Oh my God. Do you have a list? Do you know which ones?
No.
Share them. Tell me. Where can I find it?
Well, Ericka, one of the real important things here is that neither one of us are lawyers, which really gives us an opportunity to tell the truth here. That we're not tied down to looking important and feeling important.
That's true.
So,
even though you look
not being lawyers, we don't have to get into the details of it, but we understand how the government works and how convoluted the law is. So they're really worried about if this is overturned, can people go back and challenge some of the decisions that have been made since 1984 based on these rulings?
And you know that they're going to. Okay, this is the whole point. Is there's people are going to look for an opportunity. They're going to look for a lower court case that they can bring up through the ranks to make these changes.
Yes,
that's what a lot of times people do. You get asked a lot, especially as you're in your position as the RNC chair. I'm assuming people ask you a lot of questions about the government, and one of them would be, I would think about the importance of the Supreme Court and these rulings and precedents that are being set and things like that. Like, have you ever seen, do you remember a season? Sorry, I'm like, my brain is going a million miles a minute. Have you ever seen a season of the Supreme Court where it would be so consequential? There are so many consequential decisions being made.
No, one of the big things that's happening now is that they're not living on precedent. And so much of what has happened in the past is that easy route out is to say these 9 people 30 years ago or 80 years ago or 120 years ago sat down and decided some things. It goes back to one of the simple things that everyone thinks is in the Constitution, the separation of church and state.
Yeah, that's not what it says.
That's one Supreme Court justice that made that statement. And suddenly that's a precedent for all kinds of things. So one of the things we're going to see here, when you talk about dismantling the federal government and making it smaller and less powerful and less intrusive into our lives, this is an important case. Because if they can go back and look at these 70 cases, they can say the administrative state did this. It was not their responsibility. They did not have the authority to do that. And they have to overrule it. And when they start overruling all these cases where the administrative state made the decisions that the judicial branch should be making and need to make instead of running away from their responsibilities, you're going to see a huge difference and a huge change.
Yeah. And that's the people often ask or wonder why does the Supreme Court choose? Like, how do they choose which cases? How do the cases even get up to the Supreme Court? And a lot of times, especially with these Second Amendment cases, the abortion related cases, you'll have nonprofit legal teams scouring for lower court cases that they can support is it not the plaintiff, the defendant?
In
Whatever.
various cases, it's sometimes it's one or the other.
That's true, right? So they're basically like looking for cases that they can bring up to the Supreme Court to have precedent overturned or set,
Yes.
even for that matter.
I want to close out before we go to break with one thing. The people that Donald Trump nominated and became justices in the Supreme Court, they are not afraid. And that is why so many precedents are going to be overturned, because they are not afraid. How many times in the Bible does it say, be not afraid?
That's right.
365.
You're made for such a time as this. Is it really?
Yes. Coincidence?
Wow.
I doubt it.
I doubt it. I doubt it. Well,
Do you want to take us into the break?
Speaking of not being afraid, we've got the Israel Appreciation Day coming up in September. So let's hear Robert talking about it.
Why Israel?